Sweating in a bear suit. Sweating in a bear suit. I am sweating in a bear suit. Sweating in a bear suit and having lots of fun with my sweat.
Hello. Welcome to Sweating in a Bear Suit, the podcast that hasn't existed for I don't even know how long, but a while.
the podcast that hasn't existed forever.
We tried a few episodes, had a break, and thought, let's try a few more. Because they're fun.
They are fun to do, G. They're really fun to do.
Yes. So who are we? I'm Georgina Rebellion. Lots of people call me G. I'm surrounded by Gary the Labradoodle on my left and Mackie the Dashhound on my right. Who are you?
I'm Stefan Bramble, and this is Drifter Bramble, my greyhound, who's chosen the perfect moment to really get in there. For those of you that are listening to this in your ears, Drifter's really cleaning himself up right now.
He wasn't a moment ago, though. It was literally
I swear, he knows when the attention is on him, and he knows to do these things at this point.
He's drawing our attention where he wants us to.
And I'm not going to tell him to stop. It's up to him. He's
a dog. He can do what he likes.
Do your thing, Drifter. Anyway, I'm Stefan Bramble. Together, we are Playgrounded, which is a company, Playgrounded Co., which is a company that helps people with group dynamics in remote and hybrid environments. But here, we are Sweating in a Bear Suit, because that's what we called our podcast, because we decided that was a great name. And what's the game that we used to play at the start of every episode, G?
Look, I vaguely recall we didn't have a strap line, and so we'd try and make one up, and you were challenged every time to do it, and I would unenthusiastically respond every time.
Yeah, so great. You ready to do your thing? And I'm thinking of it. I didn't even plan this in advance. So here's the strapline, G. It goes like this. You go sweating in a bear suit, and then the strapline is a podcast that is salty, sweet, and has great feet.
Great.
Can I just point out, I literally hadn't thought of that.
It just came out of your mouth. That is great insight into how your brain works.
It's really good.
There's always something about taste and a bodily function or body part.
Yeah, and it's always just skirting the edge of, is it appropriate?
Yeah.
Because that is appropriate, but also you hear it and you're like, I don't know if that is. Yeah.
Yes, you have a knack. You can tell you worked in an HR team before. It's always on the border of appropriate.
Yeah, there you go. That's my strap line. You're meant to ceremonially say that that's not good enough, and you're going to have to give me another one.
Yeah, give me another one next week, please, Steph.
Done. Glad we did that little routine.
Yeah, I wonder if anyone notices. Tell us in the comments. Okay, so the reason we decided to record another one of these is it's a new year, and 2025 is here, and we thought we would try and release one of these once a month on a topic that is useful for thinking about how humans work together in this weird hybrid remote world that a lot of us knowledge workers work in. Playgrounded Co. is a remote and distributed company in that there is no physical office. Stefan and I live in completely different cities, and we work with customers who also work, at least in part, online. For those only listening, you will have missed Gary the Labradoodle. It's just kicking me every now and then.
Yeah, Gary's showing off too. He's picked it up from Drifter.
Yeah.
Yeah, we work as a company with many people, not just in different states in Australia, but all around the world, which is pretty exciting. We haven't cracked not on the globe, but who knows? Soon.
Yeah. Well, the premise of Playgrounded Co.'s existence is that work has changed and it's not working. And we think there are different ways that we can go about working together on the internet that help people work together. And the fundamental belief of our business is what we're going to start with, which is that leadership's job is to make it safe enough to play with work.
What a great saying, G. What a great saying. It's like we've spent a year developing that.
Well, that is in part true. I promise we did other things as well in the last 12 months. But what we're going to do today is just talk about the different things mentioned in that sentence and how that plays out in reality, what gets in the way of people. Really, we're just going to have a ranty conversation about leadership and work. And
because it's a big sentence. In a remote and hybrid environment, the job of leadership is to make it safe enough to play with work. I think sometimes when people say big sentences like that, you go, oh, yeah. Sometimes you go, oh, absolutely not, which is also fun. But coming from academia, when you take time to actually think about that sentence, there's a lot of weird bits in that. So to kick us off, I think one of the things that is kind of in the social media sphere at the moment, people are talking about the differences between leadership and management and what the right words are. Leadership. That sentence includes the word leadership. Jobs of leadership is to. You've actually been a formal leader. I've never been a formal leader. I've been an informal leader. I've been a teacher. I suppose that's a formal leader. But you've been a proper leader of people where that's part of your job.
Yes, this is true. I've had a job description with it, but we like to think of the word leadership as the word is intended, which is to lead is to go first and to pop it on a ship.
And to pop it on a ship. Yeah, very good. And when I think, and we've had to nut this out between the two of us, there is formal leadership. There are formal leadership roles where you're hired and it's in your job description. There is leader in the title or whatever we're talking about. But what we're talking about at Playgrounded is leadership as an adjective? No. What?
Do you mean verb? A doing word? Thank you, English teacher.
Yeah. For everyone listening at home, I'm a qualified English and ESL teacher. Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's an action that people take. And I think I'm really passionate about this because when I've worked in organizations, I have often been closer to the bottom of hierarchy, but I've led because I think anyone can be leading at any level of hierarchy because it's about looking at the things that a group needs to be successful and being the first person to help that change happen for the good of the group. That's how I think of leadership.
But it's also a formal job title. Some people have a responsibility for the company and the people in it. And we also mean those people.
Yeah.
Because also, I think, and I think you think this too, if leadership can make it safe enough to play with work, it means the people that report into them or the organization as a whole report into the senior leadership group are then working more effectively together. And the job of formal leadership becomes less about managing people drama and communicating in a way that feels unnatural but required in order to make sure everyone has all the information required to do their jobs. It makes that part of your job much easier, and you can focus on, okay, how are we going to be the next big thing, or raise our next round of money, or change the world, cure a disease that isn't currently cured, or do something really important. You can do that if you're spending less time worrying about people drama and getting the people you pay lots of money to work effectively together.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is one of the reasons why I really enjoy collaborating with you is because you and I see the same thing from different perspectives. And I completely agree with all of that. And as you're talking, I realize the other side of that you've got to hold. So the problem with having formally termed leadership, it's really good and it does all of that great stuff. And I really do believe in it, being clear on what the boundaries are and who's responsible for the grand strategy of an organization, absolutely, fuck yes, I'm in it. The problem that creates is within the system, if people are in a system going, well, they're the leaders, what does that do to a person who's not a leader? They go, well, I can't show leadership. And that's when you get dependency models and people waiting for the leaders to tell us what to do. Like when you're at someone's house and there are dirty dishes on the table and no one's just getting up and cleaning the dishes. And I know you're not arguing this. And that's why I think it's really healthy to hold both formal leadership and the idea that leadership is an action, because really good systems do that as well. And the example that I've used in the past is NASA in the 60s during the space race. What the people that made decisions about what would happen on the space flights were as low down hierarchy as possible, because the people at the top of the hierarchy, the people in formal leadership, knew that those people down the bottom were the experts, and they also needed to show leadership. And their job at the top was to support those people in the decisions that they made. So I suppose I'm doing that wonderful thing where it's both things. It's the nuance of going, we need the formal leadership to drive the grand strategy, and we need everyone in the system to feel like they have the authority to lead in the ways that help the system to lead.
But I would argue that in order for that to be super effective, only formal leadership can create those conditions, which is kind of what we're saying. Your job as leadership, formal leadership, is to make it safe enough to play with work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with you. There could be a system where formal leadership is saying, no one else can show leadership, and someone low down leads a revolution to make that happen. But the likelihood of that happening in a healthy way is very, very low. So the best people positioned to authorize the whole system to show their leadership are the people with formal authority and leadership in the system. Yeah.
Yeah, we're also talking about commercial and not-for-profit organizations that offer a product or service people pay money for. We're not trying to solve the problems of the world, because those are... The problem we face is big enough. We can't... I'm not going to attempt
Are you saying that we're not going to attempt to help nation states with geopolitics?
I don't think that's my expertise.
Okay, all right. Ugh, all right.
I know. I'll try something else.
It was on my to-do list for this week. Oh, well.
Well, just on a slight tangent, it is a slight... when you're in a leadership, and particularly people leadership role, sometimes those are the things that people ask of you when the work system that you are actually in charge of isn't working particularly well. There's a lot of, hey, but there's all this inequality in the world. You fix that somehow within our little system, but by impacting the outside. And there are great initiatives that organizations do. Those that have volunteering work actually does make a difference to the outside. But something that we are very passionate about is, if you are clear about what the task or the work actually is in the first place, you have a much better chance of actually making positive change compared with let's solve everything.
Yeah, and there are, when we're in working systems, we want to solve problems. And it's making sure that the people are focusing on the problem that they're there to solve, which is the work system's mission, and not things outside of that. Having said that, the capacity of people in leadership to tolerate when people are scared, anxious, frustrated about the world, that's a really good skill to have. But it's an art form to not get pulled into making that your day-to-day work that you're doing. I suppose,
or ignoring it entirely.
Yeah, you can't do that, because people exist in the world. It's like, when I remember when do we call it Black Saturday bushfires, the big ones that happened in
our lifetime or the
in
80s?
our lifetime, the recent one. Is that called Black Saturday?
I
In
don't
Australia,
know.
they get names. We remember
Yeah.
them. But
The ones in Victoria in about the mid-noughties. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm talking about the more recent ones. The one where just before COVID happened. It was in Sydney. The planes couldn't land. There was smoke everywhere. It was
2019.
They got a name. Black Summer. I think it was called a Black Summer because Victoria had them as well. Yeah. When that was going on, it would be ridiculous for a leader of a company in Australia where there's smoke all around to not acknowledge that right now that thing is impinging on how we're able to do our job. Now, it might mean that people still want to work. It might be, but we have to acknowledge it in some way. But the job of good authority, good organizational parenting is to help the group to tolerate all of those fears and anxieties so as we can stay healthy while we're working on the task together. And that's really hard. That's not easy. Have we gone on big digressions? I think we have. That's great.
Yeah, what were we talking about? Why are we talking about this?
Safe enough. The job of leadership in a remote and hybrid environment is to make it safe enough to play with work. We've talked about leadership. That's one of the things we've talked about.
So let's talk about safe enough.
Great.
This comes from psychological and physical safety, thinking about work. Why do we use the word safe enough? Well, I think absolute psychological safety can't exist. And part of the reason, I think there's great dialogue out there in the people that talk about business and leadership and things, that psychological safety is good for humans and it's good for business. When people feel like they can contribute, they do better work. And they have a better time doing it. That's great. They also learn stuff. That's great. The way that it's talked about, though, is that it's a leader's job to make me feel 100% psychological safe all the time. And the reality of the ever-changing world, market, and conditions around us is that cannot exist. But you can make a safe enough space with building solid relationships, trust, a solid foundation around what people are doing, making sure people know what the job is that they're there for. There are things you can do, and there are things you can avoid. We could go on a tangent about what unsafe workplaces look like.
Unpsychologically safe. Unpsychologically safe. That's the word you're looking for.
Isn't it psychologically unsafe now that we've said as many words as possible? Yes.
Yeah, okay. Maybe it is.
Yeah. It's not. There are places that are definitely not safe enough for people to do their work. And you see that when people don't share in meetings, things are quiet. There's constant fear of change because change just happens around them for seemingly no reason. And people fear for their fundamental rights at work. Bullying, all those awful things that do happen in workplaces. That is a psychologically unsafe environment. But we use the word safe enough because you need to be able to take some risks. And that's the point.
Yeah, and it's a real it is a real rant topic for both of us. And for me, it comes from actually really wanting to help systems genuinely be thriving, dynamic, exciting, safe enough places. If you really care about doing that, you look to the research and you want to really stick to what we know, not what our habits of mind are. Because it's completely natural that Amy Edmondson does this great bunch of research on psychological safety. And we go, that's really great. And it's so natural that humans would hear that and go, yeah, psychological safety is important in a group. So therefore, what we have to do is make groups safe, full stop, not safe enough. We hear that. But it actually goes against what was the basis of the research, which is when Amy Edmondson did her research, she was researching surgical groups. I could be wrong that it's not surgical groups, but it was groups working for medical outcomes. And she was looking at different groups and the quality of the outcomes for the patients and measuring the groups that had the most good outcomes for the patients, what were some unifying features of them. And she noticed a thing that was correlation. It was correlation. Sometimes I get the concepts mixed up, so I'm sorry if I have. But it was a correlation. I think I'm saying this right.
Two things related.
Yes.
Yeah.
The two things were really good outcomes were matched with groups that fought more. And that was very confusing for her. She was like, this doesn't make sense because my instinct would have been the groups that fight less would have better outcomes for their patients. This led to research. And what she discovered is groups that had a high degree of psychological safety allowed them to do the risky job of disagreeing with each other so that they could learn. Now, we forget everything else other than psychological safety. We hear psychological safety, we go, we need to feel safe. But actually, what she was looking at was there was psychological safety so that risk could happen because they valued learning. So that means that if we want to learn, we have to accept that there is risk because learning is risky. You're taking in a new piece of information that you don't know. And so therefore, if you made the space 100% safe, learning couldn't happen. Play can't happen. The job of figuring out new things can't happen because there is risk involved in it. So what you have to do is make it safe enough for those risky behaviours to happen.
The thinking about safe enough lately has made me reflect on some teams I've been in. And I think the most effective leadership group at a time that I was in called itself the alignment and coordination team. And in thinking about that, it was led sort of by the leader, CEO of the company, because he focused on let's make sure that the group of people, which was like the leadership group, knew what it was that they were there to do. Because leadership have a million jobs, and for the company, prioritizing cross-functional teams that needed to achieve goals in alignment together at that time was really important to be very conscious of. And he worked on ensuring that this was a remote team. We focused on humans and relationship building within that group. And that trickled into the way that those leaders then led their teams. And I was thinking about it because that group had people exit. It had uncomfortable moments of, businesses have hard choices to make, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time, and it shouldn't be. But it was the most productive and engaging team that I can reflect on in my time. I think it's really clear why.
In that team, did you have moments that felt risky?
Oh, yeah. And it's a really interesting example because the team was 2018 and 2019. And we built software that travel insurers used. So we basically sold travel insurance, which meant that the 20th of January, 2020.
What could possibly go wrong?
Right? It was the most productive. So we had to deal with the hardest and most uncertain time in the world that genuinely impacted our business. And it wasn't like, I think the difference in travel insurance companies at that time compared with a lot of other businesses was it wasn't that revenue slowed down or stopped. It was that it went negative because there were terms with customers that meant if they couldn't travel and they cancelled their policy within a time,
they
they could be issued a refund. So it was as a business, and then as the person in charge of the people within that business that, no longer there because that business had to shrink massively in order to, stay serviceable to their customers. I don't know if we hadn't had that culture of we know what the job is. Everyone felt like a leader. I think one of the things about calling the leadership team another name that was what we actually did, it meant that leading around the company was done everywhere. It meant when all the terrible things were happening that formal leadership had to make decisions on. They didn't have to manage their people other than communicate what was happening from a micro and macro level across the company and the world.
I think what's really interesting about that case study is in naming the team alignment and coordination. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
What you're actually doing with the name is you're saying, what are we leaders in? Well, we are the leaders of alignment and coordination. Now, the person who is the boss of the sales team, well, when they're in there, they are the leader of sales, And I think we just, because of the societies that have birthed modern capitalism, we have such an attachment to leadership and our ego. And part of what some of us want to do is say, I am a leader and you are not. And I think it takes power away from people and it actually makes us more stupid as a group. Okay, so that's safe enough. We've talked about that. Talked about some things. We have to talk about play. Again, we talk about play all the time.
We do.
If you haven't tuned into this, the story behind the two of us is that one of us, guess who, was really into play their whole life and wanted to make everything about play all the time. And one of us, guess who, was like, fuck these play consultants coming in all the time. Just let me do my work and stop making me pretend to be a tree.
And doing things that were not enjoyable and didn't help me do my work.
Yeah, it was G. And what we discovered is we actually agree. Like, I remember when I was a play consultant, G, you, and I'm talking about the archetype of you, the cynic, was always the person that got the most out of my things. Because I don't think that you dislike play. I think you dislike bad play. So when you do play well, you're like, oh yeah, fuck, this is great. But I don't want to do that stupid shit. It makes me feel weird. And I was always like, yeah, I know, neither do I. It's terrible.
Yeah. It's got a bad name. We need to make up a new word. But we're not making up a new word because the English language is wonderful and terrible. So what we mean by play is enjoying the experience of learning with people.
Great. And we're done. The end of the podcast. That is the definition. Done.
But I always like your example. Play, when we talk about it, it is useful to actually talk about kids playing because they have the most useful example.
Yep.
I always like that when kids play, they know it's very clear what game they're playing.
Yeah.
They might make up the rules, but they decide and communicate them together.
Yeah.
And it's not always sunshine and rainbows.
No.
There's often kids getting hurt, screaming, but the joy of the play is they work it out themselves to a point, and if it gets dangerous, that's when they escalate to the teacher.
Yeah.
Or in a business context, what we're aiming for is when it gets dangerous for the group, that is when you escalate to a leader or an HR person, not right at the beginning when you go, I don't agree with that person. I'm going to go tell my manager and get my manager to help me communicate this thing to this person and make it very formal and unpleasant.
And also, you can do one step before that. You can take play out before you've even done it because you're worried that someone might get hurt in the play. And that's the thing. Play isn't safe. I defy you to find any child playing any game where there's not some risk that child could get hurt playing that game. It doesn't exist. It is impossible to be completely safe when you're playing a game, because play is about discovery. Play is about learning, and we take the concept of play by, again, Donald Winnicott, and play is the state that exists when a parent or primary caregiver is with an infant and is making it less scary and enjoyable for that infant to discover everything about the world, which is a terrifying state to be in. Think about a baby who doesn't know how anything works and is currently shitting themselves. Imagine that. Imagine if you're an organism and you're pooing, you would think that part of your body is falling off. It would be terrifying. And what a primary carer does is it makes all of that okay, more okay through play. Now, as kids get older, they start to do the parenting of their play for themselves. And that's the thing that you're talking about. When they start to do shared social play, they want to play so bad that they communicate the ideas of the game, and they want to be playing, so they don't want to get distracted by having to freak out about all the problems. They just want the problems to get solved. When I observe children playing, that they solve so many issues so quickly by themselves because the play is the most important thing. And the description you just said then was perfect, because what do they do when it becomes unsafe? When it becomes really unsafe, when it's no longer safe enough to play, that's when they go to leadership for help. Because leadership's job is to make it safe enough for them to play. Once it's made safe enough, bye, have fun, kids, keep doing your thing, enjoy yourself. That's what we want in our workplaces. That's when things are fun. That's when it's not micromanaging.
The last bit of the sentence is the with work.
Yeah.
And now I think I tie this really quickly, because I think we're a lot of companies releasing products that humans buy. Where they go wrong when they think about play is they separate the enjoyment and the learning from the actual work. But if work is enjoyable and you're fighting about the work in a healthy way, you will get more done. You will innovate. You will do the things that we want knowledge-based workers to do.
Yeah.
Collaborate real good. Produce awesome things.
A lot of the time that the play has been taken from the work task, it's because they were taught and the play was taken away from them. So they need to do that to the next people. Because it wasn't fun for me, so it shouldn't be fun for you. And then when you go, oh, but you could make it fun, they go, yeah, but that's not fair, because I had some shit person beating the joy out of me when and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm talking about teaching, which is a profession that I went through. But it's almost like a hazing. It's like this institutionalized hazing that it's this fundamental idea that work isn't meant to be fun. You know, work isn't meant to be enjoyable. And you were my boss. I remember when, like, I used to talk to my friends, and they'd be like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm great. I kind of can't wait to get to work on Monday." Do you know what I mean? Like, I enjoyed what I was doing so much, and it wasn't just you; it was the team of people around. Where I was having so much fun with what I was doing, and being around other people having fun, that it was electric. You know?
Yeah. There was a time when I recall saying, someone asked me, what would you do? It was on a first date or something. What would you do if you didn't have to worry about money?
Yeah.
How would you spend your days?
Yeah.
And in the job where I worked with you, I at that time said, well, I'd still want to work some days there because it's fun. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
I got something out of it, as well as helped a company sell software. You know, it doesn't sound that
And that's, I think that is the thread that ties it up. It is the idea that leadership is in the position to authorize play. Because in this society, people have to feel that they can be playful at work, because it's an assumption that you shouldn't be. So leadership's job is to make it safe enough that people can play with their work. If that combination of things are done, if that's understood and done, and it's not easy to do, but if we do that, we're going to empower the people that work to do the best work that they can do and solve the problems that we need to solve with their own brains, not with the leader telling them what to do. And that it's particularly important in a remote and hybrid environment. I would say it's important in all environments, but it's particularly important in a remote and hybrid environment, because without that, that is the feature that unifies people together when they're sitting in different time zones, in different states, in different buildings. That's the thing that pulls people together to do the work together, that play element.
It's also an interesting time in history, because we're saying that's really important to do with work, but it's a fundamentally human thing that humans innately do with babies. So how do you do it on the internet with kind of strangers, because you've only met them from the shoulders up a lot of the time?
Yeah.
And you know, some people don't even put their camera on
unless they work from their couch.
We'll show you our feet. Which I think is why, like, we have a business, because we think people need. It's useful to help people create space so that they can do these things.
Yeah,
and it's not. Our business is not teaching you how to play. It's creating the space so you can make it safe enough, and you play in your own.
With work, it's about work. You know, and yeah, I do think it is important in all workplaces, but yes, we have moved to this new way of interacting with each other, and so therefore the ways in which we make it safe enough to play with work are changing. And if you put some intentional design on how you do those things, it can thrive. But you've got to think about it. You've got to be intentional with the way that you're setting up your work system. Oh, gee. Did we?
So how do we land this plane?
Yeah, what do we do? How do we do this?
I guess there are a couple of things. If you look around your workplace, your teams, and people aren't saying what they think, maybe they're not disagreeing ever, and everybody's really nice to each other. Maybe things have changed. Maybe there's a lot of fear. Maybe there are a lot of complaints, and you're like, stop complaining at me.
Maybe it's the opposite than your first example. Maybe everyone's bullying each other and being terrible to each other.
Yeah. Maybe nothing is getting done as fast as you like. Yeah. Maybe you're like, we really got to fix these processes or fire all these people because nothing is efficient. Yeah. If any of those things are coming up for you right now, then it is probably not safe enough to play with work. So what do you do about it? There are we got a lot of content on this, but I'm going to start with, you can think about, how do I as a leader foster great relationships, find fun, interesting ways to talk about the work, how the work gets done and what the work is or the mission.
Yeah.
And then create space for people to talk about how it feels or reflection.
It's almost like they've got 3 names that all start with the same letter. Like you would work on relationships, rituals, and reflective practice. It's almost like that. Oh my God, we should put that on a website. Gee.
For those who don't know, go to playgrounded.co/. Whatever, and you will find those 3 things.
We also we've got a brown paper, we've got a worksheet that you can do, but can I add one that if someone's just listening now, I think thinking about those 3 things is really good in general. I would throw this challenge out as well. If you are a leader who has the authority to help make it safe enough to play with work, the first thing I think you need to do is think about your relationship to play. Because if you can't be playful in yourself, with your job, with your work, it's going to be very hard to help other people be playful with their work. And so just going on a walk, talking with a friend or a partner or a dog about like, how do you feel playful with your work? Because if you start to think about that, it'll help you to think with other people in your system about how they do it as well.
So that might be the end of this sweating in the bear suit. What do you think, Steph?
Yeah, I think it's the end. Do you want, as an end thing, do you want the finishing poem at the end?
Oh, yeah, go.
Yeah, great. So here's the finishing poem. Haven't thought about it at all. It goes like this. Sometimes we do a little play, and that's great.
Oh, right.
It wasn't a poem, but it was a little. So there you go.
It was short, yes. All right, everybody, let's go make some flying planes. It's flying cars.
Oh, genius.
That was nice, wasn't it?